This video is about the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise happened during the Constitutional Convention in 1787. This is James Madison. He came to the Constitutional Convention with a plan for a new government. Part of that government was a new Congress. It would consist of a Senate and a House. The Senate would be the upper house and be more powerful than the lower house, and there would also be fewer people in the Senate. Madison wanted both the House and the Senate to be represented by the people according to their population. He didn't want the states picking the people in the Senate or the House. He came with what became called the Virginia Plan. The reason it came to be called the Virginia Plan is because the governor of Virginia proposed it. It was mostly Madison's ideas, though. He came up with the whole plan. The main features of his Virginia Plan are what became the Constitution. It's kind of the framework for the Constitution. That's why we call James Madison the father of the Constitution. A lot of the things he had in there didn't make it through to the end, but the main structure did, which was basically the three separate branches. He wanted a national government that had more power over the states than what ended up in the document in the end. Here's a clip from the movie called A More Perfect Union, where Madison is sitting around before the Constitutional Convention with the other delegates from Virginia, and he's using the cups on the table to help them visualize the new form of government that he's proposing. He almost for sure didn't do this in real life. They're just doing it to help the viewers of the movie better understand what's going on.
Thank you, sir. Now this is the form that I propose for our new government. Instead of a single governing body, three branches in a truly national government.
And what will they be?
Our first branch will be a new Congress.
Well, we already have a Congress.
Yes, but ours will be different. Since our plan expands the powers of Congress, we will check that power by dividing it into two houses, an upper house and a lower house. And note, Congress will now truly represent the people of the United States for the first time in our history.
How will it do that?
How many inhabitants has Virginia, Governor?
More than any other state, some 800,000 people.
And how many votes does Virginia have in Congress today under the Articles?
One.
Do you know the population of Delaware?
Not precisely.
Certainly under 100,000.
Well under 100,000, Mr. Wythe. And yet how many votes does little Delaware have in Congress?
One, of course. The same as Virginia.
But our new Congress will make nationally binding laws. And so the people of Virginia, as all the states, must be represented fairly in proportion to their populations.
Madison was convinced that if the Congress didn't represent the people of the United States fairly, that the people wouldn't be loyal to the government and they wouldn't even adopt the new government, let alone have it succeed. Because he felt that if the states were represented instead of the people of Virginia would never really like it and it wouldn't work. Another reason he wanted it to represent the people, not the states, and represent them equally, is because he wanted the new government to be able to tell the states what to do, to be able to cancel state laws. He had seen, since they won the Revolution, that the Articles of Confederation weren't working to govern the states. And so he saw bad government in these small states, and he wanted a power above them to be able to force good government on them.
Gentlemen, the states sent their delegates here to hold on like bulldogs to state sovereignty. Our first battle will be to get them to abandon the Articles of Confederation in favor of our new government.
Difficult, since the instructions sent with many of them specifically prohibit them from doing so.
The smaller states will oppose our plan at all hazard. Delaware will not want to lose her disproportionate power in a Congress that makes binding laws.
Nor would I, were I governor of Delaware.
But they must. This battle Proportionate representation in Congress is the battle for the soul of America. Lose it, and the states of America will never form a true union. Win it, God willing, and our nation is saved.
So the small states were going to have big problems with Madison's plan. They were, like he said, sent there to hold on to their power by their state governments. The main reason is that they wanted their voices to matter. They wanted a government that was stronger than the one that they had. They wanted to be in a government with these other big, powerful states. It would help them. But they didn't want to get dominated and always outvoted by these big states. So they had some objections to this system. Now, the main states we're talking about here are Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and Connecticut. These were the main small states who really put up a big fight. In the end, their final trump card was that they could leave. They didn't have to join the new government. They could just form their own little union or form an alliance with a European power or just go it alone. There were a lot of countries in Europe at the time who were small like them. And so in the end, the big states knew that the little states could leave if they wanted to. So they couldn't push them too far. Sometimes it's hard to see where these little states are coming from because the arguments on the other side about all the voters being equal are quite compelling. But let's try to look at it from their point of view. Imagine that today we were forming a worldwide government of all the countries on the earth. Because that's kind of what they were doing back then. They had all these little states that were effectively little countries, and they were trying to figure out how to create a super government over all of these states, but still keep the states having some power. They didn't want to dissolve the states. So how do you do that? How do you balance democratic government with these countries that are different sizes? Think about it today. If we were going to create a worldwide government and it was all by population, a few countries could just outvote everybody else. If you get India, China, Brazil, the United States, and Nigeria, you could probably, maybe a few more, you could win every single vote if it's just majority rule. So why on earth would a state like Denmark or a country like Estonia or Mozambique or New Zealand, why would any of those little countries ever join a system where they had effectively zero say? They wouldn't. They would never join that of their own free will. So they would be looking for some kind of system where they could say no somewhere, where they had some kind of equal footing with the other big countries. So that's what they're, if you look at it from that angle, that might make a little more sense. So here they are at the convention now, and the governor of Virginia has presented the Virginia plan. They've all had a chance to read it, and now John Dickinson, the leader of the small states, is going to explain their objections to it.
We may now discuss other resolutions of the Virginia plan.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Mr. Dickinson of Delaware.
Mr. Chairman, gentlemen, I, as well as others, see the need for a change in our form of government. But now, turning to the second resolution, I see words which, unless struck out, must kill it. Resolved that the rights of suffrage in the national legislature ought to be proportioned to the number of free inhabitants. Now I turn to you, Mr. Madison, as we may perhaps suppose that yours is the mind behind the Virginia plan. Do you mean, sir, by this clause that the large states will have more delegates in the new legislature than the smaller states?
Yes, because of their greater populations.
And this is done in order to destroy the equality of the states in the new Congress?
Most certainly not, sir. It is done that power might at last be derived from the people, Mr. Dickinson.
Well, I'm sure this form of representation appeals to Virginia and to Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, all large states. And it may appeal to the Deep South, the Carolinas and Georgia, which believe they will become large states. But the smaller states, will not accept such tyranny. The Delaware delegation cannot change this system. Our instructions are clear, and if we discuss it, it will become our duty to retire from the convention.
Please, Mr. Dickinson, the people, not the states, must be represented equally. Surely you can see that, sir.
No, Mr. Madison, I cannot see that.
Mr. Dickinson, even if you're not allowed to vote for proportional representation, surely you're not required to walk out if others vote for it. You'll destroy the convention if you leave.
Perhaps it is best if we leave this resolution for a while. I propose, Mr. Chairman, that we postpone discussion and voting on the second resolution of the Virginia Plan.
Second, and let every state consider well losing its vote in Congress.
The Virginia Plan does no such thing.
Order. The June 9th session of this convention will now come to order.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair recognizes Mr. Dickinson.
we of Delaware, and indeed others here, feel that it is now the proper time to review the most troublesome resolution in the Virginia Plan. How the states will be represented in our new Congress. If representation follows population, the large states will always control the legislature. Delaware's voice will never be heard. We will never confederate if this pernicious scheme is adopted.
We are not talking about states, but people. Are not the citizens of Pennsylvania equal to those of Delaware? Does it require 150 of the former to balance 50 of the latter?
So this is really the best argument made by the large states. That if the government is representing people, if the people are the sovereigns and they're, in the end, the real power behind the government, then how can you make some of them worth more than others just by the state they happen to be living in?
I will never confederate on Mr. Dickinson's principles. Let the small states do as they please. The rest of us will unite.
Hear, hear.
Chairman,
Splendid.
Pennsylvania and Virginia wish to strip us of our equal rights of suffrage. Now, they talk of equality, but what they really want is an enormous and monstrous influence. Never! Never!
Order, gentlemen, order.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Sherman.
So this guy basically comes up with the idea that ends up saving the Constitution. His compromise right here is the basic form of the Great Compromise. So he stands up and says, look, both sides want two things that can't go together. So let's just split the difference. And in the Senate, each state gets one vote, no matter how big or small. And then in the House, representation will be determined by population. So if you have more people, you have more votes. So both sides get what they want, and both sides get a little of what they don't want. And he says, let's not take a bunch of time arguing about it. Let's just vote on it and see if we can move past this issue. So they decide to start voting on his compromise. And they vote on the proportional representation part first, expecting that the large states, at least he was expecting, that the large states would vote for the one state, one vote thing second. But they don't, and you'll see.